Am I visible and audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yep, perfect. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, let's talk about some framing about the qualities of K-pop and K-pop culture that's going to get implemented progressively more and more into Filipino music. The music that is generally created by K-pop artists are going to be happy songs, light-hearted songs, inoffensive songs that usually don't deal with specific societal issues because they want to appeal to a very broad audience of people and be extremely palpable both to young and old people. Secondarily, the way that K-pop culture exists is it already is established hegemony within Korea, meaning that K-pop culture includes the creation of idols, often through from a very young age and often through extremely intensive training. Note that even if this isn't the case in the Philippines right now, the creation of K-pop culture and the amplification of increased K-pop culture within Filipino music is going to make it more likely that this also becomes the case in the Philippines, a culture that is extremely um, problematic for individuals who want to get into music and who want to be idols and who want to be pop stars, right? Cool. 4 points in our speech, in our case primarily. Firstly, on the idea of preserving culture. Secondarily, on the idea of lookism. Thirdly, about the economy. And fourthly, about the quality of art. Firstly, on the idea of preserving culture. Culture is extremely important to all individuals in any given socioeconomic group. Not at the point where we have a globalized economy and a globalized society. It's getting harder and harder to keep a sense of identity that is tied to the locality where a person has grown up. But note that this is an extremely important identity to have at the point where you have to interact with the people who are around you every single day of your life, the people who have the same lived experiences with you. You want to have a shared bonding moment with these people. A lot of this is singing the same songs, going to the same concerts, knowing the same lyrics, right? This is why anthems are very important. This is why national songs are very important, national dance and national and things like that, right? At the point where people have a shared identity, they're also more likely to help each other. They're more likely to codepend on each other. They're more likely to cooperate and increase their own understanding of each other and enrich their own lives, but also improve the socioeconomic standing of the people around them. At the point where there is a cultural loss, at the point where there is a division in culture and foreign cultures start to impact the things that people hold the most dear, people have a lower ability to self-actualize through the local identity that they hold dear. What does this mean? At the point where people are defined by culture, they hold it dear because it ties them not only to the people around them, but also to their past generations, to their forefathers and their fathers' fathers, and so on and so forth, right? They know that there are people who belong to a land. They know that their culture impacts the hills around them. These are the things that also my grandparents and their grandparents saw. These are the things that people fought and died to defend, right? At the point where you have a loss of culture, at the point where foreign cultures impact the way that your own culture and music is created, that point you have a harder time actualizing yourself through the music that is present in your everyday life. Not that a lot of people don't really decide that the music they listen to, right? You don't get to choose all the time what you're going to listen to. You're going to probably be listening to the most popular things. You're probably going to be listening it on the radio. The point where I have to be on a job, the point where I have to work in a supermarket or drive in a car or drive in the bus. I have to listen to the music that is most popular in a culture that I exist in. That means that this affects people who do not want to be affected by this. At the point where I'm driving, where I'm working, where I'm in a supermarket, where I'm at my place of work, I don't want to hear other cultures' experiences. I don't want to hear other cultures' influences. I want to hear the things that make me proud to be a member of the culture that I exist in. Therefore, I want to define myself and self-actualize through the art created by people who I believe are like me and share the same cultures and values, but also share the same lived experiences and historical ties to the land that we both originate from. K-pop culture integrating itself into P-pop makes it less likely that people are able to access this fundamental part of their identity, but also prevents the artists from expressing this identity on a public stage, as there is a race to the bottom to make all art more popular as you want to create a profit from it, therefore more like K-pop because it has a stronger economic tie. Before I go on, CEO, please.
Yeah, so this cultural exchange is kind of happening organically, that's supported by local Filipinos through content sales. If they really didn't want to see this kind of cultural thing, can they just turn the radio off?
But this argument is it is happening, therefore it must be good. I will now prove, like, on the second point about economy, why this is not happening organically, but in fact happening inorganically through a stronger K-pop lobby of record labels. Note at the point where the economy is extremely asymmetrical between South Korea and the Philippines, where South Korea has a much larger economy overall, but specifically in the field of music, uncomparably much stronger. There is a stronger influence of more established K-pop labels to push their own soft power identities to other country's markets. There is an unfair competition on the market at the point where other countries are able, specifically Korea in this case, to push the ideas of how Koreans make music and how K-pop is created on other countries' popular markets. This also means that local artists and record labels cannot come through and beat this market because they simply don't have the funds and the capital to cross-subsidize this to make their own local artists be able to even get radio time and therefore not get popular charts, and therefore not get listens, which leads to even lower even lower reviews and even lower revenue at the end of the day. Meaning that the local artists are therefore unable to create these ideas of social issues and create emotions and express their own selves in a way that is important to these people. This also means that when Revan tries to tell you, oh, but these things are happening organically. They're happening organically only because Filipinos are forced to exist in a world where Korean culture is dominating the things that they have to listen to. This is also a way for pushing Korean soft power into other markets, something that is actively done by all countries, but specifically with South Korea through the idea of K-pop. What does this mean for the quality of art then? Overproduction is the name of the game coming to K-pop. What does this mean? That at the point where Korean companies are able to create a lot of revenue in their own local markets, they're able to cross-subsidize it to other areas, meaning they're able to create quantity over quality. It doesn't matter how good it is, as long as it's everything that's on the radio, you are going to listen to it. Therefore, there is an incentive to overuse things like autotune, to focus on glamour over art, to get views and clicks on Tumblr and TikTok and things like that, to make sure that you're keeping your attention focused on this. This also stifles innovations, meaning new types of music are less likely to be made, meaning new types of expressing your own identity and your own culture and your own soul through the art that you want to create as an artist is less likely to be able to be done, right? But all types of music are also more likely to disappear as new, more popular music overtakes it, specifically funded by Korean record lobbies with the amount of money that they're able to do this. This also means that it's more likely that they're going to be able to put pressure on beauty standards that exist within K-pop culture. Things like pressure to be extremely physically attractive, unrealistic body standards, westernized beauty standards of extreme facial symmetry, of extremely lavish lives, and things like this. Things that tangibly lead to mental health problems, anorexia, pushing artists into looking exactly like the things that are popular, but also pushed by K-pop record labels, which have the funding to tell you this is how you need to look, this is how you need to act to be popular, and people then doing it, tangibly harming the artists who now have to go to a race to the bottom to be able to afford their food. This is pushing artists to create art for the money and not for the art. For all of these reasons, proud to propose.
Great. I thank Prime Minister for a fine speech. Leader of opposition.
Just check am I audible and visible. I'm assuming yes. My pronouns are he, him. If you ask verbally, starts with speech. I think there is a huge logical leap on their side between choosing a culture that you want to learn from and then suddenly absorbing all the bad things that come from the culture. I'm unclear why uniquely choosing to adapt certain good traits of K-pop necessarily leads to mental illness like Bolivia and all the harms that they apply. They run a completely exaggerated case. A few preamps first. One, how will this influence, how has this influence played out into Filipino culture, right? We think Filipino bands analyze and learn from the positive characteristics of K-pop because the music styles and the things you can mimic on the surface, right? There's no incentive for them to explore deeper and analyze, oh, they did these specific management things, I should also learn that. They're more likely to analyze the things on the surface because that's what the fans like, right? Fans like those positive aspects like the happy-go-lucky music or the, good music taste that comes from it, not the specific smaller things in the inside. I don't think they can fear that we absorb all those things. We also don't think the specific bad, unique nuances of these K-pop groups are in this debate as all because it's symmetric, right? The thing to say here is that every music artist wants to be successful, and that drive to be successful will necessarily motivate a manager or motivate an artist to act in certain ways that may be harmful. This is not because of Korean culture, it's not because of K-pop culture. I think it's because of an inherent human characteristic. In fact, I think it's better on our side because the moment you borrow from a culture that is already established or a music group that's already established, you can also learn from the failures and what resulted in fan backlash and prevent that from happening because you recognize that those patterns will evolve the same way in your group, right? Second thing to say here is that Filipinos can still produce cultural music based on their own culture. government will definitely try to push coercion, but I think P-pop groups and Filipino artists who produce like normal music are fundamentally different and cater to as different markets, right? This is the same reason why some US Americans opt for country music and some opt for pop music. Those who opt for pop music know that they want to cater to as a bigger market and are therefore creating and curating their music around that. Whereas those that opt for country music are just curating their music towards the local area. Maybe they have specific cultural reasons for doing that. Maybe they have their own reasons. They're definitely not doing it for like the reasons of getting market because they just want to cater to US own stuff and they would have just chosen pop otherwise, right? Second point of rebuttal here is that this Orwellian idea that just because one P-pop group listens to like adapts this, now suddenly everyone in Philippines will have to listen to this Korean imperialism, all that. You can just turn off the radio. Like there are many other there are conservative radio channels that only like portray like conservative Filipino music, and there are liberal ones that are portraying these new modern types of music. And Filipinos generally also listen to American music as well. I'm unclear what is the exclusivity of this point. I think people are generally diverse and are not like as simplistic as side governments say. The final thing to note here is that this integration is gradual, right? It isn't just, oh, suddenly Koreans come in and now we have to accept them. It's like more and more bands adapting these things and then doing it on a time frame that is accommodating for the people and that is accommodating for change. First argument then on cultural assimilation. I think it happens naturally. Filipino culture is itself a melting pot of Spanish and American culture and a bunch of other cultures in Southeast Asia due to immigration, all these things, right? At least now, the assimilation is voluntary and largely positive, right? Because there's no like inherently bad aspects of K-pop culture or Korean culture, like, such as there is in Cambodia or in Vietnam. But K-pop culture is also now not just Korean owned. It is something that Korean people are building on their own. It isn't the Korean government's control. It isn't in some conservative group in Korea. It is something that the people recognize as fun, and they're representing that and expressing that in the form of music, which we think caters to the fundamental reasons as to why music is good. They say that K-pop culture only focuses on happiness, and the Koreans want to accept soft power and all that. We think that is fundamentally wrong. There are a few benefits of having this assimilation. One, positive norm change. We think Philippines is quite conservative as it is, right? And there's Christian indoctrination happening from a very young age in Christian schools and around that. K-pop culture has positive norms. The idea of female empowerment, the idea of female sexual liberation, all these artists wearing revealing clothing and stuff that is challenging the norms of this like specific areas. We think this results in long-term mind like changing of the views of people as if young people are more in tune to that and like that and mimic that in their everyday lives, conservatives and even old people will get more used to it and start to realize that those things are normal, and that will end all the like conservative change that is happening in the Philippines, right? But secondly, I think more diversity in of itself is a good, right? Because it makes people like are able to express themselves in different ways since there are just much more diversity happening around and creates a society that is more receptive of change and receptive of differences. Before I move on to the second argument, are there any POIs?
OJ?
3, yeah.
So at the point where you say you can express yourself in different ways, you have to acknowledge that there's a limited amount of radio time that people are able to listen to, and K-pop is most likely to take the majority of it because it's funded by K-pop elites.
Okay, perfect. I'll go into that my next argument. But the thing to say here is if I like country music, I'm going to listen to that music because I like these conservative aspects of it. If I just want to listen to catchy music, I'm going to want to listen to the K-pop bands. There are fundamentally different incentives. You cannot simplify this debate in your way. Second argument on how we improve Filipino music scene. The framing here is that music scenes are very competitive and compete for a fixed number of viewers and sponsors, right? This is important because the primary source of funding and income and the things that determines the incomes and quality of life of these P-pop artists or these P-pop members is this funding and are these viewers. So I think this is necessary for growth, and they have to disprove why, even if you get less viewers on their side, that is still something that's good. So one, I think this allows P-pop idols to access a larger market of viewers. Globally, a lot of people love K-pop and they form groups and subcultures and fan groups built around it. Secondly, young people have been conditioned from a young age outside to like that type of music. They look for the trends of K-pop music, they look for the specific patterns, the revealing clothing, the other aspects that they can see, and look for that in other forms of music because they like those things. If P-pop culture is able to emulate that in certain ways, they're able to gain a leverage here because they can cater to that specific group. I think the impact here is that you elevate your band to the level of other K-pop groups, which means you will be covered by the same media organizations and same fan groups that are now spotlighting you even more because they recognize the same patterns here, right? Then there is a comparative benefit if P-pop groups do it on the other hand, because fans are seeking different iterations of what they like, and K-pop groups are generally and K-pop fan groups generally reward diversity. This is the example here is that Malaysia once had a K-pop group, and that group was elevated M-pop group, and that group was elevated the moment an international culture wanted to elevate that to show that there is diversity in K-pop and there are diversity in views. But secondly, I think this leads to a lot of auxiliary benefits for the music industry. One, the government is more likely to invest in the music industry because it sees it as an important cornerstone to push Filipino pride and to push Filipino soft power. Sure, there is some foreign aspects of it inside, but we think a government cares more about the recognition of the band being from the Philippines than it does care about the specific influences that band has, because we think to a certain extent that band is influenced by a bunch of other things, like even American music styles and all that, right? And American instruments like violins are not American, but Western. Secondly, young people are more likely to opt into the music industry. If the music industry is more profitable, people recognize that they can get money from doing it, they're more likely to pursue their passions and are more likely to opt into it. Thirdly, people who like P-pop music will get curious and then explore other forms of Filipino music. Maybe they realize they've always liked the specific Filipino instrument. They will now explore that and search for that in other Filipino music. So I think how you weigh this, we're okay with some level of sensationalization if it means the culture as a whole is elevated, and if it means more people opt into the culture, push sponsorships on the culture, and push funding on the culture. For all those reasons, side with OO.
Great. I thank Leader of Opposition for that fine speech. I invite DPM.
Am I audible? Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Good.
Yeah, okay. So my time start in 3, 2, 1. So basically, team opposition has mentioned the Lipin logic. It's not a Lipin logic to tell the Korean music being with the Korean record labels. As a new potential market forms in the Philippines, Korean music companies are going to come in and attempt to make a profit. They're able to saturate the market with the quantity that local artists can never match and keep the pop charts locked with K-pop influences. As they have established methods of operating in Korea, it's likely they will push similar unhealthy standards of K-pop music into the Philippines, which will only create the negative impacts in the Filipino musics. Moreover, team opposition has also mentioned about this is like listening to American music. No, when you listen to American pop music, you know it's something foreign to you. You're like a tourist visiting somewhere exotic. This is Korean pop appropriate your own culture. It is artists you know, artists who speak your language, behaving in ways that are inherently alien to you. This is how your identity is taken away from you as you feel robbed something you used to have and is now changing under foreign influences. It's basically your culture is being hidden under the other culture, which is called K-pop. And now the original Filipino music or the traditional music will be gone because of the influence of K-pop. And now all of the Filipino musicians or influencers are being influenced to the K-pop music because that are being working in this society. Moreover, you're limited by the amount of art created. You can't only live in the old music. You listen to things when you watch TV. You go to parties and the music is playing. You're in the store and this is playing. You're walking through the town and this is playing for all the shop. But even if this was not true, this debate is most impactful to people who want to listen P-pop and they are not able to do as it becoming more like something else. If it was an organic
right.
change, they could accept it.
Yeah, what is the harm of like having more people look at these things, given that it's Filipinos who are getting promoted, it's Filipinos who are getting the sponsorships and money? Why is that so bad? And why do we need to prevent people from seeing those things?
It is bad because their own culture of music is being hidden under the other country's culture, which is definitely bad for the government and definitely bad for the citizens and the overall society of the Philippines. Moving on, if it was an organic change, they could just listen to the K-pop, but it is not an organic change. The actual artists of the Philippines, they are following the K-pop trend. If there's another K-pop music by the K-pop artists are being surrounded into the Filipino music, that's not a big deal. But now the Filipino musicians, Filipino singers are being influenced, so they're making types of the K-pop music, which are being nonsense that their own culture is being hidden under the other country's culture. And moreover, there could be many backlashes, such as first, culture homogenization. The rise of K-pop may overshadow local music and culture expression, leading to a diminished appreciation for Philippine artists and traditional music genres, as I previously mentioned. Moreover, unrealistic standards. As our first speaker, probably Prime Minister, previously mentioned, K-pop often promotes unattainable beauty and lifestyle standards, which can negatively impact the self-esteem and body image of a Filipino youth, which is basically related with the lookism, pressure to be physically attractive, unrealistic body standards, mental health, and etc. This could lead
Sure.
many other negative. No, thank you. This could lead to the many other negative impacts because of the K-pop music being influenced to the Filipino. Moreover, commercialization over authenticity, the focus on K-pop's commercial success can lead to prioritization of profit over genuine artistic expression, potentially stifling local creativity. And toxic fan cultures. The intense rivalry and toxic behavior seen in K-pop fandoms is extreme. Moreover, can spill over into the local scene, into the Filipino music, creating divisiveness among fans and detracting from community support for local artists, which could be only lead to the negative impact of the Filipino music industry. Mental health concern, the pressure on us hiring idols to conform to K-pop standards can lead to mental health issues, as we previously mentioned, moreover, including anxiety and burnout, which may not be adequately addressed in the local industry. Loss of local talent, which is the most important one.
Sure.
Aspiring Filipino artists may feel compelled to mimic K-pop style and trends, leading to a loss of unique local talent and innovation in the music industry. The leader of opposition has previously mentioned that government more cares about influence of their group, not the type of music. But this is not true. First of all, there's no resource of it, and second, less diversity and no culture. No government wants their culture to be disappear. Every government want their own country's culture and own country's music, traditional music, want to be remain. But what kind of government would want their own culture to be disappear because of the other country's movie? The loss of local talents and the loss of the culture, their own culture, could be impact only negative in the Philippines. Moreover, exploitation of idols. The K-pop idol system is often criticized for its exploitative practices. Importing the model could lead to similar issue in the Philippines, where young artists may face harsh working conditions and lack of agency. And moreover, shift in music consumption. The dominance of K-pop might skew music consumption patterns, making it harder for local artists to gain recognition and support in their own country. And thank you for listening to my speech.
Great, I thank DPM for that fine speech. DLO.
Just give me a few seconds to set up my timer. Am I audible and visible?
Yep,
Okay,
loud
I
and
assume
clear.
so. Just because I take inspiration from other genres and incorporate into my music style doesn't mean it takes away from my culture and my uniqueness. The incorporation of jazz to blues to create the R&B music genre doesn't mean that it just became jazz, right? It created a whole unique new genre I've never been prouder to propose. Before I move into my clashes in this speech, a few strategic observations. I want to note that there's a large tension in OG's case because they cannot push that K-pop will be incorporated in every way and to the point that people are turned off by it and they only want to listen to songs that identify with them culturally. But at the same time, they tell us that local artists don't actually get much limelight and they don't get attention. Because if there was still demand by the people that are turned off by this new K-pop music, surely local artists still get their streams on their side of the house. I think they either have to admit firstly that K-pop doesn't take over every aspect of K-pop, or they admit that local artists still get support. Either side, we win on both. So first question on does this improve the music scene? I think the main push we get from OG here is that therefore you'll erode your culture, which is bad because people associate themselves with that culture and their identity is based upon that culture. I have 5 responses here. I think firstly, not every artist is coerced into opting into this new genre of P-pop, right? If they want to stay true to their Filipino music, then they can do so, right? Because these people will naturally still have demand for their music because natural pride and nationalism still exist, right? People on the ground, local Filipinos still want to support local artists. I think we already see this in Singapore when they still support their local artists by using them for their local parades, right? But the nuance that they missed was that on our side, via P-pop, we could reach the international scene and attract much more viewers from overseas. So our worst case is just OG's counterfactual of normal Filipino music reaching domestic viewers anyway. But even if OG doesn't want K-pop culture to be in their country, that just means they are more likely to fund or prop up traditional artists to create positive competition. Therefore, local artists are still doing fine on our Sabi House. But secondly, we told you that audience that don't want to listen to it can just opt out. They can turn off the radio, they can wear headphones when they're walking in stores, and listen to their own type of music, whatever it may be, right? But thirdly, even in our worst case where audience cannot opt out and it's like proliferating into every sphere, it's like played in every single store you opt into. It's not like this K-pop is just 100% K-pop and you only sing in Korean, right? Obviously, you sing in Tagalog, you incorporate your local culture as well into the song. Just like how BINI only incorporated music style and set designs. I'm unclear as to why K-pop is going to take over every aspect within that music in the first place. But fourthly, I don't know why culture is only dependent on music, right? I think people otherwise already bond over their shared growing experiences, their religion. In Malaysia, I bet me and Arjun listen to different types of music, but we are still united under the Malaysian identity because we share so many other experiences, right? Not just about the type of music we listen to. Even if you listen to Indian music and I listen to Chinese music, we're still bonded and we're still shared under that identity. But lastly, I don't think realistically the P-pop industry is going to implement the harsh training regimes of Korea because obviously the managers of the K-pop industry in Korea aren't coming into the Philippines and this is our local record labels implementing it. And people already know the harms of the K-pop industry, so they are more likely to be willing to move away from it. But the reason why it's so problematic in Korea is because it's proliferated in every aspect. Therefore, since P-pop isn't that cemented and it's still changeable and moldable, people can still move away from those harsh training regimes that you care so much about. Before I move on, I'll take a point.
Local artists are unable to compete with Korean music giants as they buy up all of the arenas for shows and take all of the radio times. This means that local artists will suffer economically and the culture will suffer as a consequence.
I already told you that this was a tension I pointed out in your case, right? Because if you said that people are turned off by this new P-pop genre, that means they turn to local Filipino music and therefore they still get the audience's attention. But I'm also unclear as to why on your side, local Filipino music has enough domestic attention to fill up arenas and get large concert venues, right? So the next thing OG told us that therefore on our side you'll actually constrain creativity, you'll stifle innovation. But firstly, I just want to know the lack of mechanization as to why this actually occurs, right? But secondly, I want to flip this because we actually expand creativity on our side when you force artists and you force them to think about how to incorporate K-pop elements into their local music. How do I elevate my songs and how do I elevate it to make it more appealing in addition to my Filipino elements? I think BINI added their music style and set designs, and this was creativity that had never been tapped before, and this was creativity that had never been seen in the market before. The conclusion of this class was important because we were able to mitigate all of OG's harms, therefore there is no impetus to regret this motion. In our worst case, and we lose culture, we think culture is not as important, still compared to the benefits we gave you of wage increases, expression, and challenging norms. But also note that cultural assimilation is already organically happening, like CEO correctly points out, because of things like globalization. So government had to prove why a slight increase in the rate of culture erosion is so detrimental to the Filipino identity and the Filipino industry. What are comparative then? A comparative was two things. Firstly, the P-pop group can get more success. Why is this likely, right? Because firstly, they're more appealing worldwide because what they're doing is justified. They're seeing market trends, they're seeing what's popular, and they're incorporating it into their music. This is already generally accepted by society. But secondly, BINI got 8 million views in 6 days, right? Obviously, all of these streams aren't just from the Philippines. But thirdly, we allow them to actually put themselves on the map because we provide them a pathway to success. And I want to note the framing here is important because like how OG points out that the music industry is very subjective and it's quite hard for people to make a living. Therefore, if there is opportunities and there are ways to incorporate K-pop into your local music scene and this can lead to more success, you ought to do it and it's justified to do so because it's just a way in which you achieve success, right? But secondly, we told you there will also spillover benefits to general society and just general Filipino culture as a whole. Because firstly, we're better able to slowly challenge the amount of people. When people see young people wearing more revealing clothing on the street, we see the ideas of women empowerment proliferating, and this becomes more proximate and it slowly becomes accepted by society. But secondly, there will obviously still be Filipino words in the song because otherwise we'd just be making K-pop. This means international listeners are going to be more curious about Filipino culture. I think this is intuitive, right? Because lots of people were into K-drama and K-pop, and this led to the exploration of Korean culture. But thirdly, we're better able to ensure the local Filipino music industry will also be able to shine. Because when international viewers listen to this, they'll think, oh, I actually like this aspect. I like this instrument, local instrument used. And therefore, they'll enter the industry and try to find local gems. So they'll try to find other artists that sound similar. So we are better able to help the local artists on our side as well. But lastly, record labels earn supernatural profits from their international streams, which means they have more money to take risk on indie artists and invest into smaller artists, which just leads to more diversity and innovation within the music industry. What's the weighing then? I think firstly, we already win on scale because we help people that opt into and those that also opt out. But secondly, money from streams is guaranteed. And this is more important than anything closing run because money is a prerequisite to everything else because money determines whether you can continue making music, whether you can afford to rent a studio, whether you have enough money to even make a music video for your future music that you push out. But lastly, this is also logically prior to any of the benefits government wants to achieve. Because if you clearly don't survive as a music group, if you don't get attention, if you don't get streams, obviously you'll largely die out and then you get less diversity within the music industry because there are less players within it. For all those reasons,
Great, I thank DLO for that fine speech. Closes the top half of the debate. To open the back half, member Cuff.
Great, thank you. I'm going to firstly begin with the thing that opening government needed to do but doesn't. What does the counterfactual look like? What does it look like when we don't have this importation of Korean and K-pop values? Well, I'll paint a picture for you. It looks like what we see in India and the United States, where it's not about groups, where in K-pop, almost every artist is in a group and every soloist probably has been in a group before. Now, or in the counterfactual, it will just be solo artists, like the same way we see Lil Wayne or Sabrina Carpenter. That is the way that things would be constructed. People have a little bit more autonomy over the things they do, as opposed to that being diffused over the entire group. That is what the opposition side has to have with respect to the power that artists have within each group. Secondly, there is just less money, as opening opposition correctly points out. Like, we agree that that the status quo doesn't have all that much money in the industry, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Opening government contests the value of having less money in this industry. Opening opposition fails to explain why the expansion of this music industry is such a benefit. But thirdly, we have just more labels under our side. It is that there are just more people who or corporations that manage artists and manage music and manage the production, the music videos that come out, and also manage the copyright and the intellectual property. So there's just a lot more actors in this market, as opposed to the introduction of K-pop values, where it's a mega corporation. Is one or two or three mega labels that are able to dominate the industry and decide who gets and decide basically what the main P-pop groups are. That's what we're trending towards in the status quo. And opening government, to their credit, explains how this happens, but they don't properly impact this. I'll take a point of information from opening.
What's the link between solo artists and K-pop? Surely boy bands and group music still proliferates. Looks like One Direction, 5 Seconds of Summer, before K-pop even became a thing.
Yeah, but in K-pop, there's more of it. Like, I just explained to you that the predomination of K-pop is just groups, whereas in the counterfactual, you've just pointed out a minority of circumstances where there are maybe some groups. Obviously, there will be a few groups under our side, but there will be substantially less. Be comparative, please. Okay, first argument in this speech on how there is an uptick in an abuse of idols and also an influence on children that is undesirable. So K-pop's influence makes artists or makes people more than just artists. K-pop makes the people in these groups are like idols. That is different to being an artist. An idol is someone who lives glamorously. Compare that to just an individual artist who actually lives quite day-to-day lives. They come from high school. You know what their life has been like. They talk about their experiences in their music. They actually are quite talented music writers and lyricists and music makers, whereas K-pop idols are people who are just beautiful. They are entirely airbrushed. That is that they're completely auto-tuned. That is that their dances are kind of edited. Their bodies are edited on the music in the music videos. So, and the reason why they're capable of doing this in K-pop or P-pop is because of the mechanism I gave you in the counterfact when I talked about the counterfactual. Currently, what P-pop and K-pop does is that it's a big juggernaut that controls the label, right? So they have a lot of capital. They can do things like have issue equity and issue lots of shares. They can do things like take up debt from the banks. So they have lots of capital to make these artists look really glamorous. So what that means is that children and young people really want to become young K-pop or P-pop artists. It over-influences them to engage in this content. Also, these labels are able to create very addictive content that, as opening opposition concedes, uses sex and symbolism to get people to desire to watch this. It makes people addicted to this content. It makes people feel as if it is something that they may be able to do because they want to live glamorously. That has two main impacts. Firstly, it means people over-engage in music in ways that are unproductive. Instead of spending money on, say, food or groceries or your rent or savings, you're now spending it on music and consuming music when that would otherwise be spent in a far less expensive way. Secondly, you want to maybe join K-pop or P-pop, which is bad for Filipino children who are part of a developing country who should be focused on doing things like expanding the skills and the skill shortages within the Philippines. That is doctors, engineers, nurses, as opposed to trying to, try their best to become dancers or singers. This is detrimental to developing countries. And we think that the Philippines itself is negatively impacted here. I'll move on to the next part of this extension on the cultural impact that this has. Opening government says that South Korea uses its soft power when K-pop expands. Like, literally, what does this mean? Soft power is a reason why we should ban exports. Like, their argument is non sequitur. It doesn't actually establish a harm. We will explain why K-pop actually is westernization and why westernization itself is a harm. Why is it westernization? Firstly, literally watch the information video. You can go back. It was entirely in English. Those were Filipino women, and yes, opening opposition. Sometimes they will say Filipino lines. Sometimes they'll make Filipino references, but that is significantly decreasing, exponentially so. Second, structural reason why there is westernization is because Western capital is increasing its investment into K-pop and Asian pop because they know it's a very budding industry that is growing with billions of people who would consume it. So that is a reason why westernization has over-influenced this genre. But thirdly, the most privileged in the Philippines, the ones who decide policy and decide investments, those are very westernized Filipinos who have a palate who prefers Western ideals. What does this westernization look like? It looks like changing your language, as I just explained, but it also looks like promoting capitalism and individualism. Government says that there's a loss of identity and a loss of connection to people around you. This is not properly impacted, as opening opposition explains. Who cares if your culture augments a little bit? We will explain why it's actually harmful to destroy Filipino culture by explaining what is Filipino culture in music. Filipino culture and music was created in a reaction to decades of colonialism and occupation by the Spanish and American governments. That looks like creating music that promotes family, that promotes nationalism, that promotes language like Tagalog. These types of things get destroyed under their side, which means it is easier for the neocolonialism that America wants to enforce and China wants to enforce to do. It means that we're happy for them to do things like provide debt traps. We're happy for them to set up their shops and businesses that outcompete Filipino shops and businesses. We prefer American chains over Filipino chains because the music videos promote those American chains. This harms not just the music economy, but the domestic economy in general. The opposition says, well, there are other ways to retain your culture, but you just don't engage with the reasons that we give you for why it's hard. Like we told you in this extension that this music is more addictive. It uses sex and colors and immense and very high level psychological advertising, which they have the capital to afford to addict people to this content, to convince people that Filipino culture is worth destroying and undoing and moving towards westernization. Westernization hurts the independence of Filipino governments, hurts the independence of Filipino economy. This is harmful to Filipino children. We clearly have the biggest impact in the debate.
Great. I thank member government for that fine speech. Member Pop.
Right, great. PY's in the chat. Take one from OJ. Theo believes that having an access point into a far larger and well-funded ecosystem benefits everyone in their industry, and if the Filipino music industry gets a platform and massive growth from this exchange, that's a net good from everyone involved. Our extension will be threefold. The first is to explain why cultural exchange is on net a benefit, flipping OG going beyond opening opposition to show why it's actually a good thing. Secondly, we'll talk about how this exchange gives local artists an access point into the international market. And lastly, talk about why this massively platforms local artists through funding opportunities and programs, spreading Filipino culture and directly responding to the closing argument about things like westernization. Let's go straight into it. Why is cultural exchange a good thing? This directly deals with the OG's claims on local Filipinos having their culture overwritten. This is not true. As Oo points out, many different markets exist. This process is entirely organic and voluntary, and indie artists inside the Philippines can still make their own music and share it on IG. If they care about traditional music so much, they can learn these instruments and play it themselves. In Malaysia, there are classes that teach you how to do this. You can again share it on social media to spread the influence. Let's go beyond opening opposition to show why this is actually a good thing. One, because most people want this, and is evidenced by the local youth buying all these concert tickets and watching these MVs on YouTube with a high number of views. As shown in the info slide. These are popular and catchy songs, that's true, but it's not just happy songs. There's a wide range of songs that's available. There are many good sad songs. There's Loser by Big Bang, Butterfly by BTS. BTS songs also promote things like social issues and mental health, youth coming of age, etc. Always show the diversity of themes and topics inside this thing and show how these kind of things can transcend and go across different cultures. The CJs claim that Filipino music is about post-colonial resistance. It's both reductive and extremely insulting. Filipinos can also sing about sex, drugs, and money like the rest of the world, and all the other rich diversity of themes that we see in art all across the world. These are themes that transcend identity, transcend national borders, and it's really unclear why Filipino culture cannot go to things like that. But in the worst case where you don't believe this, we would trade it off. We would argue that globalized culture is a good thing where people learn from each other. Art is a medium for you to spread narrative, for you to share emotions and experiences, and it's also an access point into various other parts of the industry. So people who watch K-pop can then watch P-pop and then go, or Filipinos who watch K-pop can then start to watch things like K-drama. The same way people that watch P-pop can go into other aspects of Filipino art as well, and to learn about the experiences and the uniqueness of the culture. We think having a more globalized mindset reduces small-minded problems like xenophobia. And if it's really true, some people are upset, they can go and just sulk in the corner because the rest of the world supports things like this. On way, we prove that cultural exchange on net good, it benefits all stakeholders involved, and it's also something that people want, so we win on the metric of autonomy. Let's move to the second extension to talk about the access point. Why do you think collaborating with the K-pop network massively boosts local Filipino culture? And I want to talk something that's specifically different from opening opposition by talking about the opportunities and the mechanisms as to how this happened. Crucially, the K-pop has a huge fan base worldwide, and the mechanism that we're looking at here that opening does not discuss is the collaboration with local artists, the collaboration with K-pop artists. Similar to how Eminem, when he was small, he was signed by Dr. Dre and was captured by all the viewer base that boosted his own profile. Eminem is now boosting others like Easy Meal and Babytron. If you're a local Filipino artist and you are sourced by someone in the K-pop industry, you have that opportunity to work with someone big and they come and collaborate with you of your MV, that massively boosts your profile because everyone that watches that bigger artist also watches you as well, which massively boosts your reputation. There's groups that are very active in the digital space like Spotify plays, YouTube MV views, etc. This much wider coverage because of the platform that we talk about. Secondly, we want to talk about relatability. So sure, with coverage, you can get people to listen to the first song, but in order to get people to listen to subsequent songs, to buy your albums, and to keep streaming you need to make that song relatable towards you, which means the beat, the kind of music genre needs to align with the themes that most people want. If Filipino artists tap into this trend, then people will start to listen and stream their music, which is a massive boost towards their own publicity, massive boost towards their own revenue stream and income, because more people listen to it because it's similar to what they have heard from others. The Spotify algorithm will recommend those things to you. Other people will recommend these things to you, and that's where the income starts. It also gives you platform opportunities. So when K-pop artists sign on local PH artists, local PH companies can sign up-and-coming K-pop talent as well, boosting and broadening the ecosystem further. And if it's true that the K-pop system is so abusive, I think it's likely that these people will come to the Philippines because the industry is much newer. I just don't think that it's going to be as abusive as the CG described. I think government intervention can step in to regulate the kind of abuses that happen. I think that people are very aware of the abuse that happens in the K-pop industry. It will take steps to prevent this from happening inside the Filipino industry as well. Abuse is a well-known problem in the K-pop industry. Regulation is much more likely to exist if it comes to the Philippines because of all the negative impacts that we've seen before. What is proof is that collaborating with the K-pop network gives you an access point into a larger ecosystem, capturing a wider viewer base, more revenue streams for local artists, and also a point to which people to explore different aspects of Filipino culture. Before I explain why the spreading of culture is on net a good, I'll take a point from OG.
Don't let CG fool you when they repeat our words in a nice accent. The clear counterfactual is local artists creating wealth by embracing a local identity that is important to every individual who wants music to represent them as Filipinos. It would thrive in a local market, as every country has a local music scene without Korea.
Yeah, the problem is that your local market has no money. If people don't want to watch it because they're not associated with all the big brands and big capital and the coverage that comes with being associated with the K-pop industry, then you can try to do that, but your upper cap, the amount of income you can earn is quite limited. The amount of money you can earn is limited. In many cases, because of the nature of the music industry, it may not be enough to sustain your living. Outside guarantees economic revenue for those people. Okay, let's talk about why this is huge for the Filipino industry. Opening opposition said you get more government funding programs, record labels will come and scout for talent, etc. This is great, but I also want to note there's a huge mechanism that O doesn't talk about for some reason, and that's concertnomics. Taylor Swift came down to Singapore with a $2 billion USD conference. Dua Lipa is coming down to Malaysia soon. All this is a huge, massive economic boost to the economy of the Filipino country. The tax and tourism revenue means that states will support the growth of the industry, and the economic growth for a developing country like the Philippines is really, really beneficial. But secondly, and more importantly, I want to talk about why the spread of the local PH industry boosts your own culture, which is distinct from opening opposition, is also something that's good. Because it is likely that if you care about things like local indigenous art, like local art, the Filipino art is producing, this gives you the platform to insert such elements into the art that you are creating. So yes, you are editing, so to speak, your own local cultural music, but you're also changing K-pop by inserting elements of your own culture into that music, and that music is being spread all across the world. We see this happening, indigenous music in Malaysia, indigenous music in the US that's being absorbed into rap. Into like rap battles with like the bass line, for example, because they like things like that. All these things show that this is likely to lead to the spread of your culture in the world. How does this weigh against Westernization? One, in terms of the likelihood of it happening, CG does not give us much reason other than just saying that money will make these things happen. I'm not sure why money will make it happen in this particular way. But secondly, if we explain, state control and the ownership by local artists over this is likely to lead to the co-creation of this kind of art, which spreads your art in a way that's good. Very proud to oppose.
Great. I thank member Off for a fine speech. Gob Vip.
Am I visible and audible?
Yep.
Get my timer up. CG win this debate because we actually engage in the context by why this music genre was formed in the first place and the context where it's being destroyed. OG spends all of PM using words like local market, local identity, local understanding. These are not mechanisms. It's a cookie cutter case that we could place in any music debate. CG's analysis is this is a particular kind of music which developed out of a colonial context, which had specific cultural and social purposes, which are eroded by the introduction of K-pop and by the introduction of hyper-capitalism and Western influences. That is a unique contribution that gets over any kind of toy analysis from opening half about a little bit of extra money or a little bit of extra culture. What does that culture mean? First on CO, then on OG, then on OO. First on CO. The first claim from CO is just an intuition pump that people like this, therefore it's popular and good. This is not an argument. Cultural mixing, as all the teams have described, happens on both sides as well. We explain that Spanish influences, American influences have been adapted for centuries, exist in the Philippines. This is not exclusive to opposition bench, so is not cultural mixing. Their second claim is just that these K-pop things have important themes like sex, drugs, and rock, which Philippines should be able to listen to. This knifes their own case because that explains why these themes are already in the music on our side as well. Filipino pop talks about sex, talks about rocks, talks about drugs. We don't need K-pop importation of progressive themes in music that also gets rid of OO's point, but it's better on our side. Because if you want someone to fight against the Catholic majority in the Philippines, you want a Filipino artist who in their lyrics is attacking the Catholic Church and their views on contraception, not just some guy talking about how hot their body is as a woman. Like, obviously that's not comparative. We get the same progressive pushes on our side. That removes OO and CO's point on that. The last claim we get from CO, I guess it's also made by OO as well, is that what was it again? Oh yeah, so abuse is not linked to capitalism because the regulation exists and people know about the abuse. But that misunderstands Jez's explanation. Unlike OG, we explain specifically why K-pop necessitates this abuse. Yes, you can regulate the worst forms of idol training. That was not our burden. But things like the idol lifestyle, things like being groomed from a young age, having your body change, but not only just that, but over here. Oh yeah, but wanting to commit to music for your entire life, as opposed to having a lifetime, a childhood or a lifestyle before you went into music, a background based in the Philippines that was unique. It's not just about the worst forms of abuse. It's the kind of culture of music that you have in your country, having a culture based on local artists, rising up in high school, having lives, as opposed to a factory of people who could be from anywhere. That takes out CO and rebuts some of OO stuff. I'll do the rest of that later. Let's talk about OG now, where our claims clearly get over them. Before I take a point from opening.
Yeah, if your side opposes K-pop because of the influence it has on people, would you defend banning K-pop in the Philippines? Because all your benefits accrue only when people don't even listen to K-pop or that music in the first place, or even rap music, just drug influences.
Obviously, as you point out, people can listen to different music if they want to. The question is, does this music dominate and erode a different other kind of music that's more important? Be comparative. Well, obviously, you don't have to ban it. It still can exist. The question is how much influence it has on the culture, if that's a bad or a good thing. Now on OG, let's start with abuse. They just drop a bunch of claims, like assert a bunch of bad things about K-pop, like it causes body issues. We give the actual mechanism for this, which is this is a distinction between an idol and a normal artist. The idol's lifestyle, the kind of things you commit to, the fact that you have to live your music for your entire life, that is distinct. That's why we get over OG on abuse. On culture, as I said in my intro, their claims here are just don't prove anything. Like, listen to the OG speech. Their impact is you see something in a supermarket and you get sad about your culture, or you walk around and you see on a bus sign a K-pop logo, you get mad at culture. That is not an impact. We explain uniquely that, as I said in my intro, this erodes one of the strongest forms of anti-colonial culture in the Philippines that was formed out of Spanish colonialism, formed from cultural mixing once they were free from America in a post-war world, which defends Filipino values of Catholicism, of nationalism, against a rising China in a more polarized world. Globalization is not necessarily a good thing. They never explain why Philippine culture is bad. They just assert it's conservative. Unlike OG, who just talks about identity and culture, we actually give you the impact. They don't give you an impact at all. Finally, on OG and the economy, they just say that you'll crowd out local artists. But as O points out, it's still Filipinos who are making the music on both sides of the house. The impact doesn't really actualize. What we explain is that, in Jez's extension, is that when you have large conglomerates shaping the norms of how you choose how to spend your money, where to spend your money, what you spend your money on, that's what shifts the economy. It's if you choose to buy Korean products, not Filipino products. If you choose to listen to, give revenue to Korean radio stations and not local radio stations, that's the delta here. It's not you lose your music industry. That's extreme from opening government. It's more nuanced than that. It's the choices that people make on the ground. That's why we get over opening government on culture, abuse, and on the economy. Let's now turn to opening opposition briefly. First, their claim is a melting pot is a good thing. This is a melting pot. Obviously, we flip this because we explain this is a bad influence on Korean culture. They never prove why it's a good thing to have. They say other cultures aren't inherently good. We explain again as before, it comes from colonialism. This music, it's a reaction, it's good, it's just cultural values. The next claim is that it is super progressive, but I just unclear if that's a good thing. Like, OG just says that it's conservative and Catholic. Why is that a bad thing? Promoting families, promoting tight-knit communities. That's not necessarily a bad thing over consumerism and increasing individuality in the K-pop sector. But also, again, we flip this because obviously there are progressives in the Philippines who use their culture to attack, large corporate edifices and Catholic edifices. But it's more effective. We listen to that. If I'm a Filipino listening to a K-pop song, it's not talking about my local area or my political issues. It's not accusing the government of anything. It's made in Korea or made in the Philippines with a Korean record label. On our side, this is a music tied to the culture and areas of the Philippines, it can do better for critiquing progressive values. We flip that claim from OO. Their final claim is on the economy. The problem with this is it makes no sense. They say governments will invest more when it's bigger industry. Why would the government of Bongbong Marcos, a nationalist who's been pushing nationalism for decades, invest in the K-pop industry? Obviously absurd. We get more investment when there's a more homegrown industry, and there's more incentive to invest in that as well. But also we would point out that K-pop can exist on both sides of the house, right? You can listen to K-pop on Spotify when it's made in Korea. The question here is what's better for the local industry itself, and them losing opportunities, losing artists, etc., is obviously bad for local industry. We want the economy as well. Vote CG.
Thank Gov for their kind speech. Final speech of the House.
Hi, am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Oh, it's my timer. We agree with the characterization of government, which is to say that the Philippines has no money. That is why on CO, we said this debate is about the average international viewer and how they will come across Filipino music. I think Gov kind of strawmans the op, because never had we had to defend a world where 100% of K-pop takes over the industry. I think O points this out. Just because I listen to a Korean song does not mean that I systematically become a Korean. Our claim on CO was that we would cushion it with a relatable and a famous figure. This is important for two reasons. The first reason we gave you was because we need money and visibility. So okay, maybe we take Gov its absolute best, and I don't say anything, that Pinoy culture gets perverted, gets destroyed, gets monopolized. On CO, we say we get to own the narrative. What is the comparative? You can talk about songs about your local issues, but your songs will not have the same amount of views as if you collab with a K-pop artist. CO is the only team that says we have to piggyback on an established platform to do so. No, thank you. We will be the first team to say that people want a localized artist that they can relate with. I'm gonna do three things in this debate. One, I'm gonna talk about OG, why they don't understand what K-pop is. Secondly, I'm gonna take out CG, who tries to run this individual versus group argument. Lastly, I'll tell you why CO wins the debate. One, let's start with OG. Let's just say, I think it's very strange that they think K-pop is auto-tune. There's more things than that, right? It is the bubblegum sound, yes, but it's also emotional ballads, right? Things like Untitled by G-Dragon. One of my favorite Korean songs is called If It Is You, which is a very sad song. It also does speak on social issues, like Blackpink are ambassadors for climate change, which incidentally nobody cared about in the same extent until they leveraged their platform. BTS talks about drugs, the coming of age issues that they face because most of their songs are self-produced. Like, it's just unclear to me why a Gov gets to run away with this homogenization of what it is. Two, but also I think it's important that TJ gave you this analysis in extension, right? Which is that we are able to better leverage on talent at the point in which our industries collaborate. This looks like top K-pop directors being hired from Korea to direct local Pinoy agencies. So yes, they say we take over the market. We say we can control the narrative. People on the ground are able to put more of their own people into the agencies. You are able to have more of a say as to what goes into the album and what goes on it. The comparative is these people will go to Korea and they'll have no control over the narrative whatsoever. So we think OP takes it on this debate. Two, let's talk about this doomsday scenario of colonialization and hiding music under. Firstly, obviously, I did say it's very incorrect that K-pop agencies just come and destroy the Pinoy market. But even if it's true, we think there are stereotypes they can break, right? Things like, oh, Pinoys eat dog meat, or they can't speak English. The truth is they do, they just speak accented English. You are unable to correct stereotypes under Gov side of the house because you lack the visibility to do so. Will you do so? Yes, but the fact that your music video gets like 8 million views compared to a BTS music video which is like 1 billion views. Like, the scale is just not comparative. On op, shoot, maybe there's some culture erosion. We think we are better able to own the narrative and to say things to correct these biases. Why is this important? I think all says this, but CO specifically tells you it's things like when you are more popular, you are able to have a social platform, you have more following, people are likely to interview you. When we look at collabs, they often interview both artists, not just the predominant artist, right? They interview the other guy to get his say on the issue. This gives us a platform of visibility in which we can call out like people which are like misconceptions about Filipino culture. So CO wins on this metric. We also want to point out that it is likely that people will gravitate towards local agencies. There's some competing analysis, right? Like, because of the fact of relatability. Like, we're the first team to say people want their own local people in this current culture. If you fall into the Venn diagram of people who like both. That's the same reason whenever a country has a member in a K-pop group, people go crazy, right? Like, if you look at Sandra Park in 21, was the first Pinoy artist, like, people went crazy. If you look at like Australian artists in K-pop like Blackpink or New Jeans, people go crazy. They think, oh my goodness, that's Australia. They can actually speak on Australia. The comparative is being whitewashed under their side of the house. Okay, let's talk about CG. Okay, I think it's a little bit strange. They say that rather have focused on individuals rather than groups. Okay, unlike all competing analysis AI, we also would say that K-pop on response to K-pop labels dominating industry, dude, the Western media is also dominated by a few dominant players like SM, YG, whatever. You also have Universal Music, Sony, and Warner under your side of the house. Like, Western media is also dominated by a few agencies. Like, you don't prove that the harm is mutually exclusive. But the second thing we'll say is that they're often more individuals in a group equals more relatability. If we agree with OG that money is finite and airtime is finite, radios are more likely to want to put out these songs because of the cult of personality. If you look at One Direction, each teenage girl had a different crush. Harry Styles, Zayn Malik, etc. They are more likely to put these figures up there. So we agree with the beautification. We think is good. Let's talk about outreach and why we think CO is the most important team in this debate. The first thing we said is that we reach a greater amount of people, and this goes above OO, right? We said that the language is how you relate to songs, right? When you listen to a song, how you listen, the first 30 seconds are very important. Like, whether you continue listening or just skip the song. If it is in Pinoy, the average international viewer from which you derive revenue from is likely to just skip the song at the point in which it is coupled with a established artist. They will think, okay, let's hang on. I want to listen to my artist verse. I'll take someone, whoever.
It is insulting that Filipino music does not discuss climate change or drugs already. We explain that it discusses it much better on our side when it's localized. That's the popular kind of factual than listening to K-pop.
Okay, to this we had two responses. The first is that it's just not true. Like, you just don't listen to enough. Like, I'm the only guy who listens to K-pop, so I can tell you that they talk about these issues. But the second thing is, we told you specifically why we had to reach more people. If your issues are as important as you say about drugs or the lack of education, we need a platform on which to first we build visibility. Right? We gave you examples of Eminem and why smaller artists often want to collab and piggyback on bigger artists to first get the fan base and then talk about the things you want to talk about. So you didn't know that in your speech. We gave you lots of mechanisms that OO didn't give you, right? Things like collabs, interviews, dance challenges, heck, even a local adaptation of a song. Like in Pinoy culture, they actually covered a Korean song completely in Pinoy. The cross-exchange of culture is on a net beneficial for us. We also talked about branching into things like drama and culture, right? Gov funding was OO's argument. Our argument was consonomics and why relatability as an artist is important. So let's flip all of the Gov's benefits. Even if you get to speak about your culture, we get to piggyback on an established platform first to get the visibility, and then we speak about our culture. If your issues are as important as Gov wants to make it out to be, we need it to reach more people in this debate. Very proud to oppose.
Brilliant. I thank Opwith for that fine speech. I thank all 8 speakers for an engaging debate. Give us around 10 to 15 minutes. We'll be back with feedbacks.